Okay, everybody, I think we could be live. And if we're not, well, hello, anyways. Hopefully, you guys can see us. Tonight, I am super excited because we have a very special guest, being Adrian M. Gibson, here with us, who is the author of Mushroom Blues, everybody. Mushroom Blues.
Mine's
And
backwards,
this,
but still.
oh, there we go. But thank you so much for being here, man. And for everyone who's watching, if there's any technical issues, let me know in the comments because this isn't the first time I'm trying a new service to host this stream, which is called Restream. So we'll see how it goes. But hopefully it goes quite all right because we have a lot of fun discussion to talk about today with Mr. Gibson here. So again, Adrian, how's it going for you tonight, man? How you doing?
Good, man. Happy to join you. And yeah, we're going to test the waters of Restream, see how it goes. Because if anybody doesn't know, StreamYard's just hiking their prices up like crazy. So
Mm-hmm. It's really unfortunate. I saw the bill come through. It was like basically 400% more than
Oh,
what I
you
was
found out
paying.
because of the bill?
Yes.
Oh, no. I heard that from another friend as well.
Oh
Dude.
no.
Yeah.
So I found that out. I was like, okay, I think it's time to find something else. So we'll try this out.
Yeah.
I should have maybe even asked you because I know you have a pretty big podcast going on your side outside of writing. You have the whole
But I
S.
don't use a streaming service for that. So
Oh,
I
you
use
used to
Zencaster,
recording?
I use Zencaster, which is primarily just like pre-recorded.
Oh, okay. Well, that
Yeah.
works too.
So
What about? I guess this is already getting into a question, but I know Fanfiatic, or not Fanfiatic, the convention that I think your
TBR Con.
podcast, TBRCon,
Yeah.
yes, is that one all recorded too, or is that live streams?
No, that one's all live streaming. We did it with StreamYard before as well.
Okay.
But what we would do is basically just like buy a month subscription of StreamYard so that we could do like 6-7 days of convention streams.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out pretty well in our favor. But we'll see how it goes with the price hike. Hi, Tim. Tim McKay's here.
Tim, you're here. Welcome, sir. Thank you so
Welcome.
much.
Do you mind if I crack this open, by the way?
Oh, hold on. Before we do that,
Okay.
everybody, this is called the Book Brew, and I haven't done this in so long, and I really apologize, but it's called the Book Brew because we're going to be talking about books and also brews. And it's been a little bit since we've cracked open a brew with somebody, so I'm really happy that I got Adrian here to get a brew going on. And on my side, I have this thing, banana bread beer.
Ooh.
And
Interesting.
apparently, after I bought it, I had no idea. But my wife told me that I drank this a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think so. She said, oh, yeah, you didn't like it. I was like, oh.
So you're going to try it again now and see if you hate it again?
So we're going to try it again and see
Okay.
how it is. But what do you got on your side?
I've got a mix. Okay, so this is a mix of South and North America. So the brewery is from Quito. It's called Latitud Cero because Quito's on zero latitude on the equator.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an APA, so an American pale ale. So we got a mix of North and South America. And I'm gonna crack this open. Wait, I'm gonna crack it open right in the microphone. Oh yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. And I did take a sip, and it's not bad. It's not my favorite, to be honest. Yeah.
You've got a very questionable face right now. This is delicious, mind you. This is very delicious.
Can you send me a 6-pack of that through the mail?
Yeah. Just from zero latitude to I don't know what latitude you're in, but we'll figure it out.
We got Mr. Wolf here as well. Welcome, sir.
We got Tim's left and right.
Mr. David Hopkins. Welcome,
Hello,
sir.
David.
I was just talking about your book today, David, so that's pretty funny. Well, welcome tonight. And we got Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hello, Ryan.
Thanks for joining us.
And Damien Buckley is joining us from the morning.
The morning. Ooh.
Are you in Australia or New Zealand? I would imagine.
Yeah, that's across the pond over there.
Yeah.
But Adrian, first question, I guess, real quick, is that I had no idea that you did not live in the States, right? I remember you telling me
really
when we were trying to schedule my book launch I
Right.
think you told me that there was a scheduled power outage in Ecuador, right?
Yeah.
I had no idea that you weren't in the States this entire time. So,
Because I mean, we always, whenever we're setting stuff up, we always reference like Eastern time zone or whatever.
mhm.
Technically, like right now, I'm Central time zone, but then when you guys go into daylight savings, because daylight savings doesn't exist here,
Mm.
then I'm on par with Eastern. So I fluctuate between Eastern and Central throughout the year. But
That's hilarious. Wow. Well, I guess a question about that. How has it been writing in Ecuador and like getting your book, right? Because I know KDP is a process that a lot of indie authors use to easily, print books and distribute books through KDP through Amazon.
mhm,
Is it easy for you to do that in Ecuador in a different country,
pretty
or is
much
it
same process.
no,
Yeah.
no? Okay,
Yeah. The only
no barrier.
difference was, so getting books here is a bit trickier.
Hmm.
So I sent all of my proofs to MJ Kuhn, my co-host on SFF Addicts. So
Perfect.
I would send her everything because I knew like if I send this to you, it'll arrive in like 2 to 4 days
Yeah.
max.
Hmm.
Whereas for me, it would take weeks to get here. And so I
Wow.
just sent everything to MJ. We would do video calls and just go over everything and make sure that it was all in order. So other than that, and then like the whole ISBN thing, like the
Yeah.
ISBN codes that are on the back, I just had to register with like the Ecuadorian government in order to get those,
Hmm.
which is a very, very simple process. So those were the only two differences, I think. Everything else was exactly the same.
Well, that's good. That's good to
So
hear. Also,
yeah, thankfully,
ISBN.
like it would have been like frustrating to be like, I want to
Yeah.
be a self-published author, but just because I live in Ecuador, then that whole plan just kind of falls apart. Would be
Hmm.
super aggravating, but it worked out.
And John, I don't mind. Keep on lurking.
Don't
You're
mama
good.
lurking.
And also, welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us
Hi,
tonight.
Michael. How you doing, buddy?
And getting into your book real quick, right? Mushroom Blues. Now, I read this, I think around 6 months ago, maybe even less. Maybe it was less than that. It's
I thought
time
you read it
just
like last month or something like that.
time is just a warp right now, man.
I mean,
It's just going.
you did launch a book, so I will give you
Yes.
that. That is a vortex. So
But I'll tell you what, I got sucked into this almost immediately. I haven't written a review yet, which I'm very sorry I have not pushed out a full-on written review
it's
just
okay.
yet. But I put the rating out there. I had a blast reading it. There are so many things that really just pulled out to me. And I think one thing that a lot of people know you by is the connection to mushrooms, right? So, how did this name come about for you for writing your first book? And actually, I'm pretty sure you told me this, and Mushroom Blues was actually not the first thing you wrote in, right? Or written.
No. So the first one I wrote was Spore City, which is going to be my next book, which I'm currently I say revising and rewriting, but like I'm taking a jackhammer to it. It's because everything I wrote Spore City over the course of like 2 years,
Hmm.
and that was the first book I'd ever written. It was very difficult, very challenging to conceptualize like the scope of undertaking a novel,
Hmm.
and learning everything as you go is a really crappy process. And it's just kind of like trial by error. It's like this
Hmm.
chapter, just give it a shot. Wow, that really sucked. Try it again, and just keep going and going and going.
Hmm.
And when I got to the end of that first draft, I was like, I need to take a break from this because
Hmm.
it killed me. And I ended up taking a break from it by writing Mushroom Blues. And it's just funny
What a
because like,
break, man! What a
what a
break!
break. Yeah. So Mushroom Blues started out as like a sort of like a reader magnet novella. And I outlined it while I was writing Spore City because it was just like the idea was fresh in my mind.
Hmm.
But I went back to that outline after I finished the first draft of Spore City and realized like I had 14 chapters that I very quickly understood like this is not 14 chapters. This is not a novella. And so I expanded those 14 chapters into a full novel, which you've
Hmm.
read. It's Mushroom Blues is 40 chapters, so it's like 14 to 40 is quite a like a stretch. But that whole process was just so alleviating, because Mushroom Blues taught me that I can write and finish a novel and enjoy it. And it also taught me so much about craft, and it taught me about my writing process. And now that I'm coming back to Spore City, after having written and published my break book, I'm actually really happy that that was the first book that I wrote and released. I look at Spore City and what I wrote before, and I was like, this is so much weaker than it needs to be. And based on everything I learned from Mushroom Blues, I can make Spore City a much, much stronger book. And I'm really happy with the quality of Mushroom Blues as it is. And there's very little that I would change about it. And Spore City, I'm just like, okay, like, let's go. Let's crack this shit open and tear it apart. So
that's awesome to see the mentality kind of shift for you there, that you've become more confident. And I think the reviews have also said it pretty plainly that people are really enjoying Mushroom Blues, myself included. But I think it's really funny how you mentioned that you were thinking of writing this as a novella in the beginning, because that was the same thing for me as well when I was writing my book. Like, I thought it was going to be a short story, under 10,000 words, bam, I'm done. And then that's when it just like shifted for me after writing that first chapter. It's like, oh, this can be expanded into so much more, right?
Yeah.
It's
just like, it's like the story kind of takes on a life of its own. And like, you know, yours went from a short story to like 250 pages. You know, mine went from a novella to like 400, like 300 and I think like 75 is the paperback version, without all like the stuff at the beginning and end or whatever. But it's just crazy how creativity works in that way, in the sense that you can have an idea and it can seed, and then it can grow exponentially in ways that you can't even comprehend until you start undertaking the process. And I love that. Like, I love writing for that, because there are like illustration and tattoos. I was able to do that to a certain extent, but there's like only so far that art could take me, like visual art could take me, because I'm limited by the space of the page, the materials that I'm using. In the case of tattoos, it's like limitations of biology and human skin. But with stories, it's like so limitless. And the fact that a character can just start to like live and breathe on their own and start to tell you things about what they want to do in the story, as opposed to be like, hey man, I have an outline. The character's like, yeah, like, screw that shit. Let's let's go off in this direction.
That's hilarious. And real quick before we move on, hopefully this does not disorient anybody, but I just realized I put myself in the wrong position. So hopefully everyone's okay after that swap right there, because it looks like I'm looking at you now, right?
Yeah. So I was fine with it. It was okay. I was adjusted.
But no,
now my life is all in disarray.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry for everyone who's watching here. And also, Damien, thank you for checking out my book as well. Definitely check out Mushroom here very soon, because if you liked my book, I think you'll really enjoy Mushroom Blues as well. Because one thing I thought was really funny
noir vibes
is that we both wrote a detective story. Before you wrote this detective story, Adrian, did you read any noir type of novels beforehand, or detective stories? Okay.
I think like my history with noir and detective fiction, and I mean, I like noir could expand to like film noir as well, because for me it's a wide breadth of like books, movies, and TV, and comics too. There's a lot of like noir comic books that are really fantastic. But like I've read a lot of like the classics. You know, we got like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and that era of noir in like the 1920s and 30s. And then expanding upon that and getting into like film adaptations. You know, you got like Maltese Falcon and whatnot. But I think for me, what really got me into this type of thing was Blade Runner, because this like the science fiction and cyberpunk kind of like adoption. I know you've recently talked to Tim Napper. Shout out to Tim. TR Napper is an amazing author, but also very well studied in noir and the history of noir and its relation to modernity and things like that. But the fact that cyberpunk in its earliest inception was called tech noir, which is so badass. Like, I love that phraseology. So cyberpunk for me was kind of like the real gateway drug in terms of falling in love with Blade Runner and the aesthetic of it. Falling in love with video games, like certain video games like the Deus Ex series, and how it's not like straight up noir, but there are like very heavy detective elements to the Deus Ex games, even though it's like technically an action RPG, right? And then that also expands to my love of things like Ghost in the Shell, and how that kind of adopts this like really heavy police procedural element, especially in the episodic way that anime functions, where a lot of anime is kind of like, there is an overarching story, sort of, but for the most part, it's just like every episode is this like self-contained thing, which really falls into the framework of police procedurals. And that, you know, really got me into shows that is like kind of crazy. There's like the sci-fi side of things, the cyberpunk. Then there's the side where it's like TV shows like Bones and CSI and things like that.
Bones,
Bones is a deep cut. I love that show so much. And even like I would say like House is kind of like this. It's like a medical police procedural in a way, because every episode is an investigation, and I just became obsessed with investigative storytelling. Which is probably why I ended up going into journalism when I was in university, because I just love that investigative sort of approach to learning something and figuring out what the narrative is, and then presenting that narrative in a certain way. And then on top of that, it's like, you know, shows like True to T's, like Seven. Seven is probably one of like the most influential movies for me, and just the work of David Fincher in general is super powerful, both on like an emotional and atmospheric level, but also storytelling and the ways in which it explores like the dark nature of the human psyche. That's what I love about noir, is the ways in which it just kind of like penetrates the deepest parts of the human mind and investigates it while also investigating some sort of like external mystery, is super compelling to me.
Now, what's in the box, right? Seven, that I think was also a huge inspiration for me too.
That twist is unbelievable. Yeah.
So that's awesome to hear that you had such a really good history here in terms of noir. I think I followed somewhat of a similar route to you in terms of the cyberpunk route of things, in terms of Blade Runner being just a quintessential book that just pulled me into the cyberpunk genre as a whole. What's funny is I just posted a picture today on Instagram of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
I saw that, yeah.
And I referenced or mentioned in that is that the aesthetic of what we see in the movie is really not present in the book at all.
The book, in my opinion, is not cyberpunk. The book is just, it's near future dystopia. You know, it's the cyberpunk element is directly influenced by the vision of Ridley Scott and the way he wanted to present the aesthetic of Los Angeles based on the sort of framework of Philip K. Dick. Because there's a lot that's different about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep versus Blade Runner. But I think Ridley Scott with Blade Runner very much solidified what I think would become one of like the sort of iconic factors of cyberpunk, which is that visual element of neon and rain, and at that time kind of like a very shallow sort of like Asian inspired aesthetic that for me lacked a lot, but obviously provided a lot of like visual oomph. And over time, I think it's kind of cool that cyberpunk is starting to re-examine the things that were foundational for it and to present them in more interesting ways, which is why I love T.R. Napper's work, because he sets his stories in Southeast Asia and places where that sort of ethnicization of cyberpunk was inspired by these places and like pulled a lot from these places. And now we start to see writers who are more deeply examining what it means for a future setting when it's set in Southeast Asia, or when it's set in China, or when it's set in Japan, or places like these.
Now, that's what I love about the cyberpunk genre, is that there's a whole genre, right? There is a framework in terms of what is deemed cyberpunk, but everything that I've read in the genre has felt completely different, right? Snow Crash compared to Neuromancer,
right.
2 different books, right? Even T.R. Napper, his 36 Streets compared to Tim Hawkins' Thrill Switch. I'm not sure if you've read Tim Hawkins' Thrill Switch.
I have not, but I do have it on my
indie.
TBR.
Indie cyberpunk book. Loved it. He also has a prequel novella that's 100 chapters of 100 words, which is the craziest attempt at a story that I've seen, but it works, man. He pulls it off. He really pulls it off. So I highly recommend that one as well. But I just love how the genre itself, it's deep rooted with these crazy kind of existential ideas. But then on the surface, we have this aesthetic of neon that just is in your face, right? It burns your retinas in terms of this neon just being in your face, advertisements everywhere. And then also behind the scenes, we have, a dystopia, right? People are just trying to get by, trying to live. And then there's just so much to explore in the genre, when I think sometimes when people think of the word cyberpunk, it's just straight up, oh, that's when I was super excited to see that when you revealed this cover, instantly drew me in, because I'm a huge fan of the cyberpunk genre as well. But when I did read this, it did not feel as cyberpunk-y as what I was expecting, which is not a bad thing at all, because I know you have plans in the future to expand on that. But this had a 90s vibe to me in terms of the technology and the cars and the transportation and them getting around. It felt like the 90s for whatever reason. I think it was the pagers too that really solidified for that for me.
Yeah, but the 90s is I like to like the cyberpunk of that book is more in like the atmosphere and the feeling of it, but also the ways in which the environment and the characters act as catalysts for exploring very deep themes, which I think is the most underrated part of cyberpunk. And you're totally right that cyberpunk is this genre that is so it's so oddly distinct yet so nebulous at the same time. Like, people know everything about it, but they know nothing about it, because cyberpunk, like noir and the sort of tradition that it's following in, is very good at delivering thrilling stories with an exciting setting and a representation of our past, present, or future that for us is captivating. But it's very easy to lose sight of the nuance in what that story is discussing. It's like, is it discussing colonialism? Is it discussing segregation? Is it discussing climate change? Is it discussing the disparate access to technology? Is it discussing the powers that governments and corporations hold versus the people who are in the lower rungs of society? There's so much conversation going on within cyberpunk books that I think is hugely relevant and hugely fascinating. And so that's the kind of spirit that I was writing in. But I like to think of, there's like this genre like post-cyberpunk or whatever. I like to think of Mushroom Blues as like pre-cyberpunk, where it is within a world that is being set up for a lot of these like big cyberpunk themes and aesthetics. And there's some of it in Mushroom Blues, but not as heavy as people might think. And when I reference something like Blade Runner, I'm not necessarily referencing the cyberpunk aspects of it. The sort of relation that I draw to something like Blade Runner is like, the way that movie or also the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, did such a fantastic job of rooting people in a very human experience, despite the fact that many of these characters are not human, and the ways in which it explored the various strata of this society and culture within a very potent and evocative setting. So it's like those are the things that I like thematically and environmentally, like draw so much inspiration from Blade Runner. And in Spore City and like future books, those are the ones that are going to like hit much harder with
the
cyberpunk aesthetics and conversations around corporations and technology and stuff like that.
I like the word they used a few moments ago, evocative. Good word right there to describe the genre. But I think we're at almost the halfway point, so I'm not sure if you have a second beer or not. But I do
I'm still working on my first one, but
I'm only sampling, so you don't worry about like chugging the whole thing down, because I don't want to get you
get me all saucy on a Tuesday night.
This one right here is called Sweet Baby Jesus.
Sweet Baby Jesus.
And this is a chocolate peanut butter porter.
Wow.
So to be honest, I usually do not gravitate towards porters. But for whatever reason, chocolate peanut butter just really it just drew me in, man. So
that sounds like a wonderful encapsulation of America, right there.
And
well, this is the only beer I've got with me, so I'm just gonna keep sipping on this this beer.
That works too, man.
Yeah.
Smell test though.
Cheers again. Cheers.
Cheers again. Cheers, sir. Thank you for being. It's not bad. It's not bad.
How is the smell versus the taste? That's what I'm curious.
Smell is better. The smell is better.
I could imagine the smell being like pure chocolate peanut butter,
yes,
all up in your nostrils. Yeah.
It smells like a freaking candy bar. It smells like I'm walking down the streets right now on Halloween day picking up candy. So it smells great. But the taste is
lovely.
Okay. And Shane, thank you for being here, man.
Hello,
thank
Shane.
you so much. Good evening. I also wanted to point out, I'm going to try this out over here in this restream to see what happens when I click this. Oh, cool.
Ooh.
So I wanted to pull up your cover real quick, because I know I just keep like showing it like this real quick, but you can't really see it in the camera that much. But walk through the process a little bit of you kind of outlining this with Felix Ortiz, right? In terms of getting this cover put together. Like, what was the kind of the text or the framework that you gave him, and did it match what he gave you on the first go around?
Yeah, honestly, working with Felix have been some of like the best creative collaborations of my life. He is such a dream to work with. But I also think I have the technical background when it comes to illustration and design, that I knew exactly what I wanted. Not in the sense of like hyper detail, but like conceptually, I knew what I wanted. So for me, my process is always like, I put together a cover brief or an art brief, whatever you want to call it. And that, for Mushroom Blues, I think it was like 7-page PDF. And that included first page, obviously, like with the synopsis and information about the book. And then second page, like I drew up a sketch. And
you did?
Yeah, just kind of like, I want to have like these two characters, Henrietta and Koji, leaning against a car on a street in Neo-Kanoko. And so that was kind of like the main basis for it. I included information about the city. There's an entire page of reference for the city in terms of like, we were talking about cyberpunk aesthetics, drawing a lot of inspiration from here's like a screenshot of Blade Runner. Blade Runner is like Los Angeles, or here's Tokyo, like in the winter time kind of thing. So Tokyo in itself was a huge reference point for the city. And then there was another page that had reference photos for what Koji looks like, what Henrietta looks like, more or less, to be like, here's a person that is like in my head analogous to what Henrietta looks like, or koji. There's an entire page of like just different kinds of mushrooms to basically be like, the architecture is made of mushrooms and sort of like mycocrete, so like mycological concrete. So I was like, take your pick, like figure out which mushrooms would work best in different aspects of the city. And he sent me an initial kind of like very rough sketch on a Saturday. And that one was more or less figuring out like the layout of it. Like, here's like the angle of the street, the angle of the buildings, like the perspective and everything. Here's where Koji and Henrietta will be leaning against the car. And then I gave him my feedback for that. He came back to me the next day with an updated version. We changed some things around. I want the street a little bit tighter. We're going to change like what the car looks like in terms of like the reference for the model of it. And then he started adding in different things. He like the mushrooms on the left, you can see in the top left corner, there's like these shelf mushrooms. Yeah, those are actually mushrooms that were growing on a tree in his backyard, and he took photos of them and then superimposed them into the artwork and painted over them.
No way.
So there are mushrooms from Felix's backyard in the cityscape of Mushroom Blues cover, which is super cool. And so it was just back and forth like that. Like, he sends me an updated version, I send him notes, and I think from that Saturday, it was about like 6 days later when I had the final version in my hands.
Wow.
Yeah.
At that point, did it feel real to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was probably the first point it felt real. I think just because of like, you're still deep in the story, still like editing and fixing things up. It doesn't feel complete, but then having like a final piece of artwork. Yes. Oh my God, it's so nice. And then at that point, it was
tough to not
cool.
like reveal it yet.
Oh yeah.
Holding it back, man.
I was like showing it to all my friends and family and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not going to show anybody this for like another. I think that was like October, and I didn't do the cover reveal until January. So.
Oh man.
Yeah. But that gave me time to also kind of fine tune the typography and the design. So Felix did all the artwork, and then I did the whole, like the title, the typography, the layout of it, the back design, and then working on the interior design as well. So.
That's awesome. Well, you two are a match made in heaven here. Is that going to be the same going forward for your next books? You're going to keep doing the typography, and
just for the Hoffman report, I'm going to do the typography. Okay. But I've tapped Felix for the entire Fungalverse. So every Fungalverse book is going to have Felix's artwork on it.
The Fungalverse.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's like the shared universe that all of this takes place in. But like I'm going to do the design and everything for the Hoffman report. But like Spore City, for example, and its sequels, I got Felix doing the artwork as well. And Sean T. King is going to do the typography and design for the cover. So I'm very excited for that.
That's exciting. Going back real quick, we talked about references to Blade Runner, right? But something that's pretty apparent, or at least I thought it was apparent, were references to, I think, TV shows and actual books. And one of them is this one right here, Mindhunter.
Yeah.
That's from the TV show Mindhunter?
Oh yeah, I told you I'm a big fan of David Fincher.
Mindhunter is just
excellent,
prime TV, and I'm so excited that it got picked back up for season 3.
Right, because apparently David Fincher said it was like the most difficult thing he'd ever worked on.
I'm sure.
In terms of like the script and the traveling and the film schedule, he said it was like the probably like the most like stressful undertaking he'd ever done. But for me, like I watched Mindhunter with my wife, and we were both just like completely
us too,
just captivated by it. It was so good. So yeah, that like Mindhunter, that chapter title is a reference to that show because it's just fantastic.
Bound of the Broken, Bloody
Shout
Roses.
Shout out to my boy Ryan Cahill and Nicholas Eames.
And you're part of the break-ins, right? So you say Ryan Cahill's name, you gotta take a shot here.
Gotta take a shot. Yeah, gotta take a swing.
And look at that, we got
Caden Love. Dr. Love is in the building.
Wow, here we go. The break-ins. We keep multiplying over here.
Yeah, and then like every song in the book is a reference to like an author friend of mine.
That's so cool, man. I love it. I know we were talking about this earlier in terms of the writing process, in terms of it feeling freeing, right? You have the ability to do anything, literally anything that's in your mind that you can conceptualize and think about and imagine. You can write it down, right?
Yep.
If you want your character to go XYZ, they can go do XYZ. And that's when it personally clicked for me in terms of, oh my God, I love doing this. This is so much fun. Yeah. At what point for you did you realize, all right, I love this and I want to keep going, and you got goosebumps? You're like, I love writing, right? Was there a particular moment when that happened for you?
Spore City was a slog all the way through. But I loved it. I love world building, and I do love writing, but Spore City was an arduous undertaking. But Mushroom Blues, there was a moment where like that book started out, Henrietta was actually a man, and then he was in third person perspective.
Oh, third person.
I started writing it, and I was like, I'm not feeling this. So I changed that character to a woman, named her Henrietta, started to work a little bit more. And then I switched from third person to first person. It was like, boom, everything just like clicked, seamless and so intuitive. You know what I mean? It's like when you get into that mode of that creative mode where things start to feel a little bit like out of body in this like weird spiritual sort of way. That moment when I started experimenting and changing the story from third to first person, I was like, man, this works so much better. It works so much better. Because then I was able to really internalize her character so much more and make the story as a whole much more personal, in the sense that it's not just a murder mystery, but it's also like a very existential journey for Henrietta and her going through a massive perspective shift. And so that was kind of like the beginning, and that moment where I felt like, holy shit, this is such a cool art form to be able to pursue.
No, I love it. I think the first time that happened for me, when it just clicked, was when I first wrote the first set of dialogue, which is the very first chapter, by the way, with Merc, if you remember reading that guy. And it was just so much freaking fun to write that dialogue. I was laughing to myself while writing it. So I was like, I mean, when you're having so much fun, doing something like that, I think it's gonna really stick for a long time. And it kind of goes to a point of something that I found out for a lot of indie authors is just not to become burnt out and to overwork yourself. For you, I know you have a lot going on, man. You have your book, your family, you have your podcast as well. You got Fanfiatic as well. So for you, is it a struggle to manage all that time and to get focus time? Also, reading too. I forgot about that. Reading is also its own little time slot you have to account for. So, like, is time management pretty tough for you right now in terms of all these things you have going on?
I think after the book launched, it took me a while. Like, looking back on it in hindsight, I put so much into the launch of Mushroom Blues, whether it was like the book itself, my book tour, and the fact that I kind of haven't stopped marketing since the book came out.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we're here right now, so which I'm very, very happy to do. But at the same time, like, it's been very difficult to like switch my brain out of marketing mode and kind of can I adopt you, Caden? You're like 14, so you can be my oldest son. So it was a real challenge for me for like months after Mushroom Blues came out to kind of like switch my mind off of marketing mode. And during that time, I was kind of like recharging my creative battery with more reading and catching up on like TV shows and stuff like that. The stuff that I kind of put aside based on the fact that I'm launching a book. So I kind of have to like choose. He's 12. Okay. Caden's 12. You're still my oldest son. And
what
just trying to
up, Caden? Go to bed.
It's bedtime. Go to sleep. and trying to balance everything. Like I think my balance between family life and everything else is good in the sense that like I'm very organized. I have like quite a set routine in terms of like what I do during the day and when I have time for certain things. Like the podcast we record twice a month, and so it's very specific about like that's me time, and my wife is very helpful in that regard as well. But then within that time, it's kind of still difficult to figure out like, okay, am I going to continue to promote Mushroom Blues? I have the audiobook coming out very soon, so I'm like right now I'm like going through the review process of the yeah, me too, Michael. Going through the review process of like reviewing every chapter and listening to it, making sure there are no mispronunciations and all that kind of stuff. And so there's that. There's do I work on a short story that I'm working on? Do I continue to work on my revisions for Sport City? Do I read? So there are like all these different things that are kind of like competing for time within my like non-family time. And so still like since the launch of Mushroom Blues, it's been very difficult for me to figure out or to kind of like find the drive and the motivation to like go headfirst into like one thing until it's completely finished, because there's just so much being juggled right now. So it's like the podcast and family, it's like those things happen sort of in a very smooth, unconscious way. But then everything outside of that, it's kind of like trying to figure out, you know, Mushroom Blues is doing really well, like 7 months on, and I'm really happy about that. But that's, I think, because of like my sustained effort when it comes to marketing and when it comes to, you know, like thankfully things like SPFBO bringing a bit more visibility and different things along those lines. But it is still very difficult. And I just try to like, you know, not necessarily avoid, but just like, you know, I love
Just
seeing
do
my
it.
friends post. I love seeing my friends post like 150K into my newest draft, and I'm just like, good for you. Like, fuck off. No. But I'm really happy when these goals that they have, and I'm still trying to figure out how I exist as an author who is published. Because before you're published, nobody's paying attention. Nobody knows what your routine is like, what your writing process is like. And releasing a book, launching a book is a huge endeavor. And I learned so many lessons from Mushroom Blues that I'm like, I don't want to rush anything else. And whenever it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to take things at a pace that I'm comfortable with, you know, like once the Mushroom Blues audiobook is out, that'll be a huge weight off my shoulders, because then I don't have to like listen to that story anymore, because it's like I'm reliving the entirety of Mushroom Blues by listening to the audiobook and going through that review process, which is great. But at the same time, I'm like, I need to move on. Like, it's like half my brain is still there, and the other half is like, I want to like get going in this direction.
Totally understand. And I think it's also very commendable that I know when you first were looking into doing an audiobook, you're looking to narrate it yourself for a while, which when I heard that, I was like, dang, that is a huge undertaking. And I commend him, because that is a huge process that I don't think I could never do that. I do not have the voice for it, so it's already just put off in my plate. But I know you have the podcast. You even launched like the first 2 chapters, right, on YouTube for you narrating it. So I was like, wow, this is great. So
yeah, but then I realized after 10 chapters that I hated doing it. So it's like, oh man, I'm a quarter of the way through this. Do I want to go through another 3 quarters? And no, I did not. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I am capable of many number of things, but I had to accept that I didn't have the experience or the range of vocal capability to properly give Mushroom Blues the audiobook that it deserved.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a really hard decision for me to make. But I talked to Michael R. Fletcher about this because he's also narrated a few of his own audiobooks. And we were both just like, man, it takes so much time. Like, it takes ages, especially when you're doing it for the first time and you don't have the practice when it comes to your vocal range, when it comes to your breathing technique, when it comes to all these different aspects.
There's so much
so much to it. So when I reached out to an audiobook narrator, Imogen Church, and she got back to me within like 2-3 days, and we just hit it off via email, and she was super excited to do the project. And I've listened to audiobooks of hers in the past and was like, she has an amazing voice and amazing range. And I wanted the narrator for Mushroom Blues to be British. And I was just like, I spent so much time researching like British female narrators who don't sound like Downton Abbey or whatever else, like that very posh British accent, that is very fitting for like historical fiction, but is not fitting for a murder mystery. And so when I found Imogen's work, I was like, hell yes, this is perfect. And we hit it off. Like, she wanted to get a mushroom tattoo to commemorate doing this project, because I also want to do the whole series with her. And then I told her, like, I'm going to be in London in August when I went for Worldcon in Glasgow. So I stopped in London first, and I was like, I'm a tattoo artist and I'm going to be in London. Like, do you want to do the tattoo with me? And so she came down to London for the day. We had brunch together and then went and hung out, and I did a tattoo on her, which was a super fun experience.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, it's like our relationship is great, and she just knocked it out of the park with her narration. So I'm really happy that I made that decision. Obviously, like, financially, it's difficult for a lot of indie authors to justify doing an audiobook, because it's like, how are your sales in general? Like lifetime sales, and in terms of how that could compare to the viability of doing an audiobook. And that's why a lot of indie authors do Kickstarters for their audiobooks, which makes total sense. But basically what I did is, like, just this week, like, Mushroom Blues has passed like 1,400 copies sold across like paperback, hardcover, and ebook. I earned out at 600 copies. So I've taken everything from then. So, since I think it was like after 8 weeks or so, I sold 600 copies. So I've taken everything since then and just reinvested it into doing the audiobook. And so for me, it wasn't like a huge financial burden as much as it might be for some authors. And based on those sales, I feel like that justifies doing an audiobook and doing it myself. So I've got Imogen. She's already done all the narration. It's all complete. And then we got a sound engineer friend here in Quito, who's amazingly talented and is going through and doing all the post-production on every chapter.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's so exciting, man. No, I love audiobooks. I think it's definitely going to tap into an audience that might have not picked up Mushroom Blues just yet.
Exactly.
So that 1,400 can quickly turn the dial real quick and get that up even faster. So
yeah,
that's so exciting. I know on my front, I'm going through the whole audiobook process myself as well. And it's just insane to hear someone with that experience and that range that you were just talking about just bring those characters to life. So
it's like, it sounds way better than it did in my head.
Like, when I heard the first dialogue scene, I laughed, but also I was just like, I was mindful at the same time because it sounded so freaking good. I was like, this is it. This is it. So I'm super excited for you to have that book, the audiobook.
In your case, thank you, man. And in your case, your book is shorter. So it's like, cost-wise, it's not as much of an investment. I think like both of us lucked out on the indie front. We got some friends who were like, oh shit, man, I got like a 700-page book.
I know.
Like, that's going to be so expensive.
To Josh Walker with his chunky book, man. I'm looking forward to reading it, but it's a chunky book.
Yeah, but an audiobook of that, hot damn, that'll be
Oh God.
pricey. So
I know we're coming close to the end of this, so I have a few more questions for you in terms of number one is that now that you've sold, you mentioned over 1,400 copies, and you have, I think, over 170 plus ratings and reviews, right, on Goodreads. What's the most like surprising feedback that you think you've received so far for Mushroom Blues?
I mean, there's like, I'll go like negative and positive. I think like all the negative responses that I've read is like, I have very thick skin, so like I'm okay like reading the 1-star reviews and stuff. Most of them are pointing out things that I already knew were weaknesses about the book and were quite obvious to me. And then there are some where it's just like, you know, people just being a little bit batshit, like, I hate that there's a mushroom glossary in this book. And I'm like, well, you can skip it, and the people that don't know much about mushrooms will benefit from it. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
But when it comes to the more positive reviews, they're just, for me, it's very heartening and very special to see the ways in which people are connecting with this book and these characters. You know, like, I knew going in, like, Koji's my favorite character. He's my boy. And then to see how people react to Koji. And I know like Caden's always like Koji stan. Like, he's such a Koji fanboy, which makes me really happy because it's like Koji becomes a POV character in future books.
Ooh,
which is great.
Koji books. Here we go.
And then also seeing how people react to Henrietta's transformation, where it's like, yes, I know she's unlikable at the beginning, and I did that on purpose. But the people who stick it out and kind of like see that transformation through to the end, the responses I've seen, how strongly people connect with that, to say like, this journey was worth it, as opposed to someone who gave up like 10% of the way through, would never see that. So for me, it's been really special that I put a lot into Henrietta's journey, and I put a lot of myself into it in terms of like the ways in which psychedelics affected her life and directly affected her experiences in this book. That was hugely inspired by stuff that I've gone through. And so to be able to put that into a book and then see people connect with that is really cool.
No, I'm right there with you. I do think though sometimes those 1-star reviews can get to you, especially your very first book, and then your very second review of all time is a 1-star. You're like, oh God, what did I do?
And then your average just tanks. It's like, oh God damn it. Yeah.
But I'm so excited that Mushroom Blues is taking up in the way it is, because I freaking loved it. People are loving it, and it's also now an SFBO finalist. So I know you're up there with like the ranks of these other huge books that are getting huge exposure, and it's definitely deserving. So I want to congratulate you on that. And also going back to your podcast real quick, you've met with some really big player authors in the industry over your time doing this podcast. If you had to choose one, like, what's the best piece of advice that you think you've received from all these authors in terms of writing?
Damn, dude. That's a hard one to encapsulate. I've talked about it before, but I think Jim Butcher gave me some of like the best practical advice, which was, I'm going to give you two. Okay, so like practical advice, and I think more like I would say like experiential advice. Jim Butcher, in terms of practical advice, the masterclass that we did with him on scenes and sequels, and by scenes is obvious, but by sequels, it's like not only it's sequential storytelling, not only in terms of like one book to another within a series, but also sequential storytelling in the sense of one scene and how it transition into the next scene. So multiple scenes within a chapter or from chapter to chapter. There are different levels that you can kind of play with sequential storytelling. And I think sequential storytelling definitely plays out a lot more visually and obviously in comic books, where you have the sequence of where your eyes track across the comic book panels on a single page. So the advice that he gave in terms of how he has written every single Dresden book, approaching it from the sense of every scene boils down to 4 elements. It's the emotion, it's the reaction, it's the review, and then it's the decision. So the emotion is how the character reacts to the thing that happened before. And if it's the first chapter, it's how they're reacting to the thing that they're confronting. Then response is how is sort of like the next step of that emotion and how that plays out physically and cognitively. And then after that, going into review, which is where the more rational mind takes over, and they start to analyze what happened and why they're feeling a certain way. And then decision is where they act upon that review and decide what is the next step for me to take. And he basically boiled it down to every Dresden book he's ever written has been with that sort of structure.
I love it.
And it's not necessarily like each one is equal in every scene. You can sort of play with it, and it depends on genre, it depends on the necessities of the scene. You can sort of give more weight to emotion or more weight to response and decision. There are different ways that you can play around with it to heighten tension and to work with pacing and stuff like that. So it's really fascinating. I'm very thankful to Jim Butcher for laying that all out for me, because then I applied it back to Mushroom Blues, and I was like, I was doing so much of this unconsciously. And then the chapters where I felt like it was a little weak on that front, I was able to tighten up. And then on a more experiential level, and by experiential, I mean on like a human level, the masterclass that we did with Ken Liu, author of the Dandelion Dynasty, that was on technology as story, was kind of like the way he pitched it to us. And he argues that all of science fiction is actually technology fiction. And that the reason for this is that the ways in which humanity and the human experience is directly and fundamentally interlinked with technology is so far back in the human experience and human history that we would not be who we are without technology, and technology wouldn't be what it is without us. And so the ways in which humans and technology influence each other and shape each other over time is a really profound thing to think about. And I think a genre like cyberpunk is perfect for this, because cyberpunk tech noir is a direct lineage of the relationship between human beings and the technology that we create. Subsequently, the technology that we create creates us and creates what we are to become. And I think that is the most beautiful thing about fiction, and the ability for us to think about the ways in which what we are creating now, extrapolating upon them and imagining what it could make us, what it could turn us into. And at the same time, looking back into history, if you're more into fantasy and that kind of thing, the ways in which the entire flow of human experience has boiled down to things that we don't necessarily define as technology. But if you think about humans' relation to fire, fire is a technology. Fire is us manipulating things to create something that didn't exist before. That is a technology. Bees also use technology in the sense that their hive is an extrapolation of their innate biology taking form in a thing that didn't exist before. Anthills are the same thing. These are basically like external mechanisms that are reinforcing what we ourselves believe and what we want to do with ourselves and with our thinking. And so every moment in human history is just a continuing dynamic between technology and what our biology and our creativity are kind of like pushing us to do again and again and again. And so that masterclass just completely blew my mind and changed my thinking about how human beings relate to technology. And especially now when we have things like social media and different forms of communication, but also sort of echo chambers that are driving large, seemingly more self-contained groups of human beings to push towards certain things. So it's kind of like our technological narrative is being redefined into greater divisions of human beings. And so, like, what would that do in our future? How will that turn out in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right?
That is so thought-provoking, man. I need to go watch this masterclass ASAP, because that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
And two, get me in contact with Jim Butcher, okay? That would be fantastic. Because Dresden Files, man, that's one of my go-to series now for just a cozy feel. It's not even cozy. It's just you feel at home. To me, at least.
Yeah, it's a comfortable form of storytelling. Yeah,
and I love it. So, awesome answers there. I think I love Jim Butcher's response to you on that in terms of boiling it down to those 4 distinct elements. I think that's a great way to look at it, and just playing around with it, play with the formula a little bit per chapter, and then just spice it up for the readers so that it's not formulaic, but also still interesting and engaging. So I love that, man.
Right, because it boils down to certain things like, I mean, going back to like the human experience, that's kind of how humans like unconsciously react to things. You know, we have a very visceral emotion, then we you know, kind of take it step by step from emotionality to rationality, and then we make a more clear-headed decision. I think parenting teaches you that more than anything. Is like you see in real time with a kid, or how you react to a kid, the ways in which your mind is triggered by certain things, and then the ways in which you kind of play out in your mind that reaction, and kind of move it away from emotionality and into a more rational line of thinking where you can make a more level-headed decision. And so it's like similar things can play out in storytelling too.
Especially when you have kids like Caden over here. So.
Yeah. He makes me so angry. I don't even get to reason or decision.
But this was awesome, man. Thank you so much. I'm just going to give you the floor real quick to just leave it off with whoever is watching up until this point, and whoever's watching the replay as well, in terms of if you have a spot for them, where you want them to go, if you want to give any last remarks. The floor is yours, Mr. Adrian M. Gibson.
Thank you all for watching too. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you can get Mushroom Blues in hardcover or paperback or ebook. It's on Kindle Unlimited as well. Super floppy. If you like a floppy book, this one's got all the flops.
Boom.
There's floppy mushrooms too. So if you like that. Also the hardcover, if you like Felix Ortiz's art, under the dust jacket, you got
stunning.
This. So I just gave it like the full naked art for the hardcover.
Looks so good.
So if you like that, audiobook will be out soon, probably within the next few weeks. And yeah, that's about it for Mushroom Blues. Yeah, you can find it on Amazon, wherever, or you can order it from your local bookstore, or you can get signed hardcovers over on the Broken Binding. And then in terms of me, you can follow me and my shenanigans pretty much everywhere at Adrian M. Gibson. Just like look on whatever social media platform that's the same profile name all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And then SFF Addicts, you can catch MJ Kuhn and I every Tuesday. We got new episodes. We do interviews with authors, but then we also do a follow-up masterclass with them, diving deep into some aspect of writing, craft, genre, theme, publishing, just the whole shebang of what it means to be an author. So you got lots of, I think we're at 127 episodes as of today. So you've got lots of stuff to enjoy on the back catalog.
Wow.
But yeah, that's it for me. That's on like all the podcast platforms, or you can watch it on video over on YouTube or Spotify. So,
well, thank you so much, Adrian, for being here tonight. I had a blast. Hopefully, you're not too tipsy from the one beer. I think you should be fine, right? You should be fine.
I'm drunk, man. I'm a mess. I'm a hot mess.
I guess out of these two, to be honest, I prefer the banana bread.
The banana bread, really?
Yeah, I guess I'm not a fan of porters. I should have known that. The only
That's
problem
fine.
is that I have 5 more cans of these now. So
Oh no. Just open them all and smell them and then just throw them away.
ooh, it smells so good.
It smells so good, man.
Awesome,
Oh.
man. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.